Hey everybody, this is Felix Fons, the photographer from Denver, and this is going to be Cooking with Felix. We're doing mile-high cookies today. First, when I wanted to start this little recipe in my tiny flat is classy wording for a studio apartment that I live in, I wanted to start it with a little ambiance, so I lit this candle to make my kitchen area smell more tasty. First, I'm going to crack 2 eggs in this bowl and set them aside. 1 egg. 2 eggs. Coming up shortly. Make sure you check the date on your eggs. You don't want to use old eggs in your mile-high cookies. Now, I'm calling these mile-high cookies because this is in Denver, and so we are high altitude, above 5,000 feet, and so we're going to have to make some changes to basic cookies. I didn't have 2 sticks of butter, so I had to do a little measuring with my over 2 sticks in 3 different fractions. But thankfully, like your hopeless dreams, butter is fungible. Alright, so I've now measured out 2 full sticks of butter. I've thrown it in this bowl. My butter was cold though, so I used the microwave on defrost for about a minute, and that turned my butter all squishy. Now I add some sugar. I keep my white sugar in this Folgers container because it's better than the crappy paper bags it comes in from the store. This recipe calls for 1.5 cups of white sugar. However, because we are doing high altitude, you need to reduce each cup of sugar you do by about a couple tablespoons. So I'll remove a total of 3 tablespoons of sugar from this 1.5 cups of white sugar. And sometimes you only get your sugar right on the second one. See the gap I left there in that 1/2 cup? Now it's time for the brown sugar. This recipe calls for 1 cup of brown, but again, I'm going to leave a gap to reduce that sugar by about a tablespoon. If you put too much sugar in high altitude cooking, you will get crunchy cookies, and you don't want that. And you can pretend they're slightly healthier for you. Now I'm going to cream that butter and sugar with my hand mixer. Oh, so creamy. Oh, watch it go around. Butter and sugar. Some of the best stuff ever. It's a really good combination. Now we're going to add some vanilla. My vanilla is really syrupy for some reason. Oh well. Besides that tablespoon of vanilla, we are then going to add those 2 eggs I left out earlier. Another important thing for high altitude cooking, you don't want to overbeat your eggs. So when I whip this around, the previously creamed butter and sugar with the eggs and vanilla, I'm going to barely do it at all. Just whip it around really quick on a low setting. Not really going to care if the eggs get too mixed in at this point. Not a big deal, there's plenty of mixing later. Time for some flour. This recipe calls for 2.5 cups of flour. Go ahead and do all of it. The full 2.5 cups, baby. Oh yeah. There's 1 cup. Here comes 2 cups. And then I'm just going to use that same cupper to do another 1/2 cup. Once you do enough cooking, you start to realize how much is what, and you don't have to use specific measuring implements for every single thing. Time for some baking soda, not powder. This is baking soda, the Arm & Hammer stuff. Recipe calls for 3/4 teaspoon, but you're going to want to reduce that. Go ahead and do 1/2 teaspoon. Again, for high altitude. Also 3/4 teaspoon of salt. Go ahead and put that in. Now it's time to do the cherries. We're putting cherries in these cookies. These are craisins and not technically cherries. You should get some dried cherries if you can. These are cherry juice infused craisins. Whatever, use real cherries if you can. I couldn't find them at the store. And we are going to try and add a little moisture back into these cherries with that sweet black velvet whiskey that you see. This is really high quality whiskey. Really, it's not at all. How many cherries do you use? I don't know, about 1 cup. cup and a half, whatever. This is not rocket science. Putting just enough whiskey in to touch the top of the cherries so they're all soaking in it. I'm going to add some additional vanilla as well so they can soak in the whiskey vanilla. We're going to have vanilla whiskey cherries in these cookies because that's awesome. Going to try and mix the flour in a little bit. It's gotten too tough, and I'm sending flour smoke plumes up. I don't want that. So we are done with the beaters. Instead, we're going to use this large wooden spork. Oh yeah, the spork of doom totally whips right into this. If you have a real mixer like a KitchenAid or a Bosch, you can use that. Use the big dough hook. I don't have one of those, so I'm going to use this clawed wooden spork of doom. Time to add the oats. 2 full cups of oats. These are going to be delicious because they're cherry chocolate chip oat walnut cookies. I love lots of crap in my cookies. Lots of interruptions, you might call them. I'm adding some water here. That's not in the recipe. That's again for high altitude cooking. You're going to want to add a little moisture. I added 2 tablespoons per cup of flour, so 4 tablespoons because there were 2.5 cups of flour. Here I am adding some chips. 6 ounces of chips is enough. You could go a little more than that, not a problem. About a cup of walnuts as well, cup of chopped walnuts. This is where we're getting all those delicious interruptions. And finally, my cherries. Really, they're craisins, but cherries, I'm adding those. I'm using a fork to strain them out of the whiskey, because I don't want all that whiskey liquid in my cookies. Probably wouldn't hurt it if you replaced the whiskey liquid, or did the whiskey liquid instead of the water. That'd probably be fine. And then to make my little cookie balls, I use a scooper. It works really well. This is about an inch scooper, 1.5 inches maybe. And when you stick it in there, it makes nice cookie balls. And you can go ahead and fill it up. It makes pretty big cookies. After putting these cookies in the oven, I did this at 400 degrees. The recipe is 375. I bumped it up because of high altitude. And cooked them for about 11 minutes. When I did that, they came out looking perfect. These cookies are soft and delicious. Yum.